Hey, North Keithville Baptist Church. We've been missing y'all. This is the first time we've been back in this building since the stay-at-home orders. And when we walked in the sanctuary, we just got that kind of this is home feeling. In fact, Fontaine says, what did you say?
I miss the smell.
She said she even missed the way the church smelled, in a good way. Okay, the church smells. But the point is, we miss the building. We miss this geographic location, certainly. But more than anything, we miss y'all. And we've been encouraged in how we've been able to stay in contact in various ways. And that's what this is about. This may be a little selfish. We just want to kind of connect with you guys in some way. And we just pray, as always, like in every service, that God will take these 3 songs and He'll just use them to minister to our fellowship. So, with that said, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Love y'all.
Well, I'm kind of homesick for a country to which I never been before. No sad goodbyes will there be spoken, for time won't matter anymore. View the land I'm longing for you, and someday on me I stand, where my home shall be eternal. View the land, sweet view the land.
I'm looking now across the river, where my faith will end inside. There's just a few more days to labor, then I will take my heavenly flight.
View the land I'm longing for you, and someday on thee I'll stand, where our home shall be eternal. View the land, sweet view the land. View the land, sweet view the land. love you, Lord. I know your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Of your voice, you have led me through the fire. In the darkest night, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God.
All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, surrender now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, surrender now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God. Our last song is dedicated to Ron Coburn. I don't know, this is his grass cutting song, Victory in Jesus. And I really want to hear him sing it sometime. If we have to, bring a lawnmower and make him feel more comfortable or something, maybe, then, but Brother Ron, this is for you, and I really would like to hear you sing this song sometime. Anyhow. Well, I heard an old story, how a Savior came from glory, how he gave his life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. I heard about his groaning, of his precious blood
let on me. Then I repented of my sins and won the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with His redeeming blood. He left me and I knew Him, and all my love is to Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about a mansion He has built for me in glory, and I heard about the streets of gold beyond the crystal sea, about the angels singing and the old redemption story, and some sweet day I'll sing up there the song of victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with His redeeming blood. He left me and I knew Him, and all my love is to Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood.
Amen. Fontaine, why don't you close us in a quick prayer?
All right, God, thank you so much for our church family, North Keithville Baptist Church. We thank them so much for the family that they are to us, and we miss them dearly. God, we ask that you protect them in every way, Father, as we continue this strange journey. And God, we ask that you just continue to draw us closer to you. We love you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hey everybody, I'm glad you made it back with me today. Today we're going to be talking about the seventh commandment. That's Exodus 20, verse 14. It says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." And man, I'm going to tell you something. I remember when I started committing adultery. I bought my first truck, moved out of my parents' house, started buying my own groceries, assumed a mortgage. I just had to start paying insurance. Got married, started having kids, trying to keep them fed and clothes on their back. Man, adultery is tough. There's a lot of responsibility with adultery. So when I read Exodus 20:14, it says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," I get a little bit excited, man, because that means I can maybe act a little bit less mature than I am right now. Don't have to have all the responsibilities. Maybe somebody will kind of take care of me a little bit more. Maybe the consequences to my actions won't be as severe. So it might be a good thing that you don't have to commit adultery as much. That's not what that means. And that's weird to use that word adultery for what we're going to talk about today, because adultery kind of sounds like what I just described, being an adult. But that's just a weird word to use to talk about, because today this commandment really asks you to be more responsible. It demands more self-control. It demands you to be more intentional about how you act as you live your life. So what does this commandment mean? Well, God just gives just the basic, to the point. Exodus 20:14, don't commit adultery. Then Jesus expands kind of the meaning, or gets closer to the heart of what that command means. And that's found in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 30. Jesus said, "You've heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell." So what Jesus did with adultery, that command, is the same thing he did with the command of "thou shalt not murder." He looks not at the act, but he looks at the motives and the attitude and the decision that precedes the act. He says, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Does that mean a person with one eye can't commit adultery, cannot lust, cannot sin? Or a blind person cannot commit adultery? No. He says, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Does that mean a one-armed man can't commit sin? No. That's not what it means. He's talking about there has to be a change of your heart. He's talking about that if this is so serious, sin is so serious, that it's important that you do whatever it takes to put yourself to the side and to put him first and his kingdom first. And it's tough with this command, because he's saying it's not the act of committing adultery. It goes all the way to the heart, and that's the source of that sinful act. So what is adultery? Well, what's at the heart of this command? I want to look at it in the scope of marriage today, because I believe you could take this command, you could expand it a lot of different ways. And as I've studied, really my heart has been just around what does this commandment look like inside of a marriage. And so we're going to look at Ephesians chapter 5. We're not going to look at the entire chapter, but we're going to look at bits and pieces of that chapter to kind of get our mindset around what is this commandment, how does this apply inside of a marriage. You say, well, I'm not married. Well, maybe you will be one day, and this will kind of give you a heads up, a head start on how to guard against breaking this commandment before marriage or after you are married. So here we go. We're in Ephesians chapter 5. I'm going to look at verses 21 through 33. Verse 21 says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. We don't like the word submit. It makes us uncomfortable. It makes us feel like we're doing something against our will. But he's saying, submit to one another as you would to Christ. We can trust Christ. We can trust Jesus. So if he tells us to do something, and we can trust him to do what he's saying. So what does he tell us to do? Well, he gets into talking about wives and husbands. And there's also something else he's talking about here. See if you can catch on. It says, "Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. And husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or without any blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Verse 33 says, however, each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So this call of this commandment is really a call to faithfulness. If you look all the way down to just the root of this commit adultery, and it's tough to define that, but at the root it's talking about rebelling. It's talking about being rebellious. And you think about how you can rebel in a marriage relationship, how you can be adulterous in a marriage relationship. It goes much further than some lewd act with another person that's not your spouse. This commandment or these instructions that are given to the husband and wife in Ephesians 5 is saying you submit to one another in marriage. That's how you're faithful to each other. That husbands, you're to love your wives as Christ loved the church. Like, for real. What did Jesus do, man? He was completely selfless. He lived a perfect life. God's not asking you to live a perfect life, but he's saying don't be selfish in marriage. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 says love is faithful, it's kind, it doesn't boast, it doesn't brag, it's not easily irritated, keeps no record of wrongs. That's tough. It says that it's not rude, it's not selfish, it celebrates truth, it bears all things, always hopes, always trusts, and endures all things. That's a pretty high calling for a husband and a wife in how they should act in marriage. And if you're not trying to act that way, then you are being rebellious. In marriage, a way that we're faithful is we forgive each other. It says it keeps no record of wrongs. Love doesn't. A lot of times we keep a record of the reasons why we may be acting rebellious in our marriage, and we also keep a record of why we're not acting rebellious in a marriage. I heard an interview the other day with a guy talking to Oprah Winfrey. Don't know why that caught my eye, but it was this pastor talking to him. He said, I've been married for, I think it was, over 50 years. And he said, we made a list when we first got married of the reasons we fell in love. He said, after all these years of marriage, he said, we have one reason of why we love each other, and that's no reason at all. He said it's a commitment that we've made to each other. There's no list of I love you today because of this. He said we just love each other. Man, that's at the heart of your marriage. If you start keeping records of things, then there's going to be reasons why. That you can be faithful or that you can be rebellious. But marriage is a covenant. I read as I was studying for this message, someone said that we are most unlike God when we break a covenant, because He will not break any kind of covenant or commitment that He's made. So this call or this commandment in Exodus 20:14 is a call to faithfulness. So how can we guard against committing this commandment or breaking this commandment? How do you guard against not committing adultery in your marriage? Well, the first step is it has to begin with you. You know, there's that old illustration I've used several times. If you've ever been on an airplane, you know what I'm talking about, with the flight attendant stands in front of everyone and they pull out the oxygen mask and they say, in case of emergency, this is going to fall out from the ceiling, and be sure that you secure the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then help the person next to you if they need help. Well, it's just common sense, but in a state of panic, we may try to help someone else before we help ourselves. If that were the case with an oxygen mask, if you're passed out, if you hadn't taken care of yourself, then you're no use to anybody else. So that's the same way with marriage, man. You want to guard against committing adultery in your marriage. You want to guard against being unfaithful. You want to guard against just not being connected with your spouse in marriage. Then take care of yourself first. And take care of your spiritual growth. Read the Bible. Pray. Talk to God about what you're struggling with. Grow spiritually. Learn how He feels about you, but learn about Him, and learn about the things that please Him. Take care of yourself first, and I promise you, not only in your marriage, but in every aspect of your life, you will be better off. Then I would say the second step is do it together. Share spiritual growth together. Walk with one another closer to the Lord. Pray together. You say, man, I don't pray with my wife. Listen, I've been there. I remember the first time that Amber and I prayed together. It was weird. It was awkward. And the only thing that made it become less awkward was by doing it more and praying together and sharing with each other. We don't sit around every day and have a cup of coffee and do Bible study, but we talk. That's part of our dialogue, part of our conversation in life is what the Lord's teaching us. Share with each other your dreams and your hopes, and go on dates and take time. It's okay to leave the kids at the house or with somebody and go on a date with your spouse. Hang out with each other, get to know each other, and don't take each other for granted in that way. But share life together. It may sound like just easy and common sense stuff, but we neglect that kind of thing all the time. The third thing I would say, this is going to be almost obscure at the beginning, but walk in the light. Walk in the light. I read a Bible study a couple of days ago by Greg Matt, and I really like him. And he was doing a Bible study out of 1 John, and he was talking about this war that goes on in each one of us between light and darkness. And what he's talking about is between right and wrong. And we all understand the difference, the contrast between light and darkness, right and wrong. I don't care what age you are, there is a little bit of anxiety when it comes to being in the dark. A couple of nights ago, I went outside looking for my cat. Yes, I have a cat. And I was looking for him because it was time for him to come in. And I had my cell phone, and it was dark. The moon was not out. I mean, it was covered by clouds or something, but it was dark out there. So I had my cell phone, and I was walking around, and I'm not going to call my cat. I'm not going to do that as an example here on this camera because that's weird. But I was just looking for the cat around, walking up and down the driveway, and I heard something over by our camper, and I don't think it was the cat. And so I started exploring to find out what that sound was, because I'm not easily scared. But then as I looked more and more, I started thinking about every scary movie I'd ever seen in my life. I'm like, what am I doing? So I rolled out, man. I turned my phone off, went in the house, and I said, Cat, you're on your own. But you know, darkness, there's some weird stuff that goes on in the darkness, and it's weird for us because you can't see everything in the dark. It's confusing. It can be scary. But a lot of times we will tiptoe around and flirt with the darkness. and that can get us in a lot of trouble. And Ephesians 5 talks about darkness and light. And if you'll look with me over in Ephesians chapter 5, I'm going to read 8 through 14. It says, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. For the fruit of light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord." We're children of light. If you're a Christian and you got the light of the Lord living inside of you, and you will be miserable if you live in the darkness. It says, find out what pleases the Lord. Talking about that spiritual growth. You want to guard against committing adultery in your marriage? Learn what pleases the Lord and then walk in that. And stay away from flirting with the things that don't please the Lord. And Ephesians goes on to talk about that in verses 11 through 14. It says, "Have nothing to do with fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, for it is the light that makes everything visible." Listen, if you flirt with darkness in your marriage, what's going to happen? Example, gossiping about your spouse, talking bad about your spouse. Eventually you're going to find somebody that'll listen to you. And they'll probably, the reason they'll listen to you is because they want to do the same thing. And then before long, you're in this echo chamber of you talking bad about your spouse. And then that group is going to grow because you're going to find other people that want to do the same thing. And it just starts off little like that. Oh, he don't ever do this, or she's always saying I should do that, or blah, blah, blah. That group is going to grow, and then there's going to be some joker that enters that group that says, hey, I've got some ideas of how to make your life better in spite of your spouse. Hey, I'm doing this. I'm trying that. I'm looking at this website. I do this. I do that. Hey, there's this guy at my work that it always smiles at me or brings me a cup of coffee every morning. I wish my husband would do that. Well, girl, you ought to just pursue that. Or, you know what, I saw this good-looking girl and blah, on and on. And before long, you have created an environment, a new reality that has taken you from, I'll never do that, to, I know this is wrong, but to a place where you say, man, everybody's doing this. And now the darkness has become light for you. Now you have created an environment around you that is going to breed adultery. Man, don't tiptoe around the edge of the darkness. Because once you get in there, it can truly become your new reality. And that's going to breed unfaithfulness. It's going to breed all these other anti-love situations in your marriage, and that's going to lead to a miserable life, and that's going to lead to sin. So, how do you guard against committing adultery in your marriage? Grow spiritually, individually. Then grow spiritually with your wife or your husband. And look, stay away from the people and the influences that would breed that living in darkness scenario that we talked about. It really does matter who you surround yourself with. I don't care if you're not even dating anybody, or if you're engaged, or if you are newly married, or you've been married for several years. It's good to have people around you that you can say, these people have a healthy relationship, and you get to know, man, how their marriage is healthy. It's good to have those conversations both ways. I'll tell you another thing that I asked you just to kind of be on lookout as I was reading through Ephesians 5 to see if you spotted something else that was going on there, not just the wife and the husband relationship, but in those verses, it says in verse 32, it says, "This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church." You know, a good quote that I read through this study is, "Marriage is a human echo of the relationship between Jesus and the church." Marriage is a human echo of the relationship between Jesus and the church. You know why your marriage may be under attack? You know why the institution of marriage as a whole is under attack? Because when the devil sees the marriage relationship, he gets enraged, because that's a picture of Christ and his bride, the church. The devil hates marriage. He hates the marriage relationship. He will do anything to wreck it. He'll do anything to destroy it. He'll do anything to drive the slightest wedge between you and your spouse, because your marriage is a picture of the relationship that Christ has with the church. Jesus said, "Pluck your eye out." He says, "Cut your hand off." Man, it's just that serious. Ask him today. Ask him this week, "God, give me a heart that'll be faithful to you, so that I can be faithful to my spouse, so that our marriage will be an example of your faithfulness that you had for your bride, the church." Do not give the devil an inch. It is just that important. I love you guys. I hope this encourages you. I hope this challenges you. I hope this helps you. Don't try to be the best husband or wife on your own. Man, let the Lord grow that in you. Let him strengthen you in that, so you can be an example for others and for your kids. And that he'll get all the honor and the glory for that. Commit today as a family. Commit today as an individual that you want to have a faithful heart, and let the Lord grow that in you. Let me pray for you. Lord, I thank you so much for your faithfulness, that you have been faithful even when we have not been faithful, when we've been rebellious, we've been adulterous. You still love us, and you still pursue us. Lord, grow in each and every one of us a faithful heart, so that we can be an awesome example for you, for your faithfulness, and that you'll get all the glory for it. I love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I want to say a special happy birthday to my daughter Ellie. She's turning 13 on tomorrow, which is May 3rd. So happy birthday, Ellie. All right, have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye.